It is an absolute pleasure to get to sing to you the songs that I'm going to be singing on the album Lead Me On. These songs are born out of a lot of long walks on the farm, the joy that I felt over the birth of my first child, some of the hardships of loving and living with Gary Chapman. It's just been such a full 3 years since we put out Unguarded. And boy, a lot's happened. I hope a lot's happened in your life. It's such a joy to look back over the last 15 years and think, 15 years ago, I gave my life to Jesus with such high hopes and high dreams of who I thought that he would be in my life and who I might become because of his grace. You know, and 15 years down the road, I think, he was bigger than I dreamed. He was mightier than I imagined, and all through the years, he's loved me in spite of myself. I got to tell you what, 15 years, there are a lot of things I don't understand. There are a lot of lessons I still have to learn in life, but I've really thought about the songs on Lead Me On. I've been off the road for about a year and a half. In fact, moving on toward 2 years. Before that, I spent the better part of 2 years every night staring at thousands of faces from a stage. And the best thing about, for me, the best experience about the album is feeling like I'm having the chance to talk to you like I would if you were sitting in my living room by my fireplace. And I got to pour the coffee, and I got to have you as an audience one-on-one. It's really a good feeling. I appreciate that you would listen. And I guess the first song that you'll probably hear from the album is a song called Saved by Love. The song Saved by Love is about Laura. I don't know if you'd figure this out hearing the song, but I think really, I thought I was writing about Laura, but I was really writing about Amy. And I think what I was saying is, you know, I made a commitment to my husband almost 6 years ago to be there for him. But the truth is, in my life, I don't know if it's this way in your life, it seems like every day I wake up, I have to recommit to the things that I've committed to. And between you and me, the one thing that gives me the strength to continually recommit is the fact that Jesus loves me. And that love reaches far and wide, and it's the one thing that saves. So here goes the first of our conversations, and I'll be looking forward to a lot more. There's a song on Lead Me On called 1974, and the reason I named it 1974 is just because it's about an experience that happened when I was 13. And hopefully other people will hear that title and go, gee, what was I doing in 1974? Reminiscing, I think, is good for all of us. And for me, reminiscing about that year is important because that's the year that I really gave my heart to Jesus. And it came about because I was invited to a prayer group of high school age kids. And I had grown up in church, and I had even been baptized in the church that I attended. My father was a deacon at a church in Nashville, Tennessee, and I had been baptized and made a profession of faith in front of the congregation. And my profession was, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Now I've gotten older and I realize, you know what? The demons believe that too. They quake and tremble, but they don't call him Lord. And what happened in 1974 was that for the first time, I not only believed in Jesus, but I called him Lord. And the song is about that. It's about my conversion experience. What happened was that I was invited to a Bible study that was led by some college graduates. It was all high school kids. And one of the leaders happened to be dating one of my older sisters. Anyway, I went just because I thought he was a doll. And I would go to any group probably just to spend a little extra time with this guy. And I had grown up and been to church camp and a lot of Bible study groups. What was different about this group was, well, for one thing, the kids were mostly from a different sort of background than I was from. And it was an inner city church, and my family did not live in the inner city in Nashville. And so I kind of came in. Nobody had any preconceived opinions of me, and I didn't have any preconceived opinions of anybody else. I just was sort of observing. And when they said it was a prayer group, they weren't kidding. I mean, these kids got down and started praying, and it was different from any prayer I had ever been a part of. I mean, they prayed like they really believed God was listening to them. And I think my whole life, I had wanted God to love me, and so I prayed prayers that a good girl would pray. But I was old enough to know that I was not a good girl. I was just kind of trying to be and sort of faking it. And it was through their incredibly painful honesty that I came to see that as hard as I might try to be a good person, that I was sinful. And to taste the forgiveness that the true love of Christ brought was the sweetest wine I had ever known. The song was written, obviously, 14 years later. I think sometimes 14 years down the road, I still try to be a good girl. And I think when I pray sometimes, instead of being honest, I'm praying what I think God wants me to hear. Instead of just saying, gee, you know who I am. Lord, you know that I've got these cruddy thoughts and I'm a cruddy person. And just between you and me, I could sure stand to feel and to taste the forgiveness like I tasted it a long time ago. I think that's why I wrote the song. The first time I heard the song, What About the Love, Rhonda Fleming, one of the co-writer with Janice Ian on the tune, had come to a songwriting meeting that we'd had. We were just interviewing different songwriters and hearing their new material. Rhonda had not said much of anything during the whole meeting, and we were about to be rushed off to a second meeting, and as we were getting up to head out the door, Rhonda said, gee, do you have about 3.5 minutes? I just have one song that I'd like for you to hear. Of course, I was thrilled she'd finally said something. Everybody else in the meeting was kind of loud, and I thought maybe she'd sort of been intimidated. Anyway, she just quietly walked over and put this cassette into the stereo. And Brown Bannister, my producer, walked right up in front of the speakers and closed his eyes. He had his back to the rest of us who were in the lounge area. As the song played, I felt everyone in the room reduced emotionally to their knees. Brown turned around when the last chord sounded, and he had tears streaming down his face. He is one of the most quick-responding, sensitive people that I know to music. He really wears his heart on his sleeve. The rest of us felt that way. We just didn't happen to be sobbing at the moment. And I thought, this is a song for our times. An interesting sideline to the song What About the Love is that basically the verses are built around 3 very vivid pictures. The first verse is the picture of an evangelist. The second verse is a picture of a man on Wall Street. And the third verse is about an old person who's been committed to a retirement home. At that time, this was over a year ago, at that time, none of the televangelism dirty laundry had hit the newsstand. The stock market plummeting that happened in February, none of that had happened. And it was strange that once we chose that song, verse by verse, incredible news-shattering stories hit the papers. And I found myself thinking, what is it about this song that seems to have a prophetic quality? And I still think that to this day. I think that 2.5 years ago, or however long ago it was, that Janice Ian and Rhonda Fleming wrote this song, I believe it had some mysterious prophetic quality. And I think it's very timely that someone sing it, and I feel so honored that they asked me to be the voice. I think it'd be very difficult to be in any kind of public platform in Christian ministry and not feel the weight of, and not feel like we have all learned in a big, screaming, all capital letters voice, judge not that you be not judged. I think it's so easy sometimes, out of guilt and frustration and just human nature, to constantly be pointing the finger at somebody else. And I think sometimes, as children of God, we really tend to act more like just plain children. You know, a room full of 2-year-olds where everyone can only sit there and yell no at each other. And, oh, goodness, it's just so vital and so important for us to move on and to press on to the higher plane that God is faithful to bring us to. But I think there is some pressing on that needs to happen from our standpoint. And that is the whole crux of the song, What About the Love? When Michael wrote the music, and Wayne, I guess we all kind of helped with the melody, but when he came up with the music for the song Lead Me On, I had a really undefinable picture forming in my head. And Wayne and I sat down to write the lyrics to this song no less than probably 8 or 10 times. And each time we'd start on an idea and I'd think, no, it's not happening. And finally one day in frustration, Wayne's kind of quiet. Now, this is Wayne Kirkpatrick, by the way, my co-writer. He said, well, tell me what the picture in your head looks like. And I said, I see a band of travelers, and they're not anywhere in space, they're not anywhere in time. They're walking across some God-forsaken place that's foggy, they're hooded, and amongst themselves they're singing a chant to help them see past the hopelessness of their environment. They're singing. And he said, "Are you in the group? Are you singing to somebody?" And I don't know who's in the group, but they're, stumble, stumble, stumble. That's why we kept meeting over this song. Well, a lot of times when you're working on a song, you'll try to get into an environment that's kind of conducive to what you're working on. Anyway, so Wayne and I were meeting to work on this song in Franklin in a house. This was back in the wintertime, and it was very cold. There was no heating in the house, in this old pre-Civil War house. And we were sitting around a space heater that eventually broke, with gloves on and sweaters and one light and a little jam box, trying to think of what this song was about. And we kept talking about this band of travelers and trying to decide who was in the band of travelers and why was it desolate and why was it eerie. And then all of a sudden we just started thinking about times in the history of our lives, or in the history of our country, or in the history of the world, when physically it might not have looked like that, but emotionally it felt like that. And the first circumstance we thought of was back before the Civil War, in the time of slavery, and what that must have felt like. And that's what we wrote the first verse about. And then again, National Geographic had come out right around this time with an article about Poland, present day and past, and it had a section on Auschwitz and all of the people that were killed. And as we wrote, the second verse began to take on the tone and the personality and the setting of southern Poland in the early 1940s. And the chorus became for us the chanting song that this timeless band of travelers sang to themselves. And that was the chant, "Lead me on. Lead me on to a place where the river runs into your keeping, someplace far away from this God-forsaken land." And I could never presume to understand what it was like to be a slave under a plow, or a political prisoner, all that led to death, all those circumstances. But I do know what it's like to be a slave to sin. I know what it's like to be a slave to mediocrity. I know what it's like to, even these days, to witness the slavery of other people and the political injustice that's going on in the world around us. And man's inhumanity to man is so overwhelming that surely God's ability to lead us on, either physically or in spirit, is our only hope. And that's what this song became. And I think really that's probably why we named the album Lead Me On. I don't know that it's the strongest song on the album, but as far as what my heart and soul and spirit constantly says to the Lord, it would have to be the chanting of the phrase, lead me on.